Why, good morning. Hello. Thank you for coming along. I am here in Lower Manhattan in a spot called Two Bridges. And the reason it's called Two Bridges is because, yeah, you guessed it. Now, the Two Bridges are the more famous and iconic Brooklyn Bridge, which a lot of people know. It's like a symbol of New York. I decided to focus on the Manhattan Bridge, which is like no respect. It's like definitely not an icon, unless you're on the other side in Brooklyn. In Brooklyn, you get a nice shot of it's probably the most Instagrammable picture. You get a cool shot of the Manhattan Bridge from Brooklyn. But when people come to New York, they visit the Brooklyn Bridge. But the Manhattan Bridge is pretty much just as old. It was built in the early 1900s. You know, it was huge for New York because it connected Brooklyn to Manhattan and allowed people to live on the other side and work here. Because prior to that, the only way to get to the city was by ferry. So people would just ferry back and forth. But with the bridge, horse and carriage could get over. They built trolleys on the Manhattan Bridge to, bring people over. It's just very cool to know that these bridges have been around for so long, for over 100 years. And I just still marvel at the engineering, like they're just so old, these bridges. I can't imagine back then in the late 1800s, man, it's just incredible that it's still standing. And, there's these super loud trains that go back and forth. I knew I shouldn't have parked here. So I'm directly under the Manhattan Bridge now, and I am just shooting along the streets. There's a lot of graffiti on this part of New York. We also got some cool light coming through here. Try to use some of that as well. Another great thing is the Manhattan Bridge is, Chinatown is under the Manhattan Bridge, which is great. We got someone cool coming with some boxes. Hold on. As I was saying, we are near Chinatown, and all kinds of great signs, flavors, cool smells. I smell buns being made. Oh, over here there's some cool graffiti. I also have some good light happening here. Okay guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about editing philosophy because I think some people really stick to their guns and stick to one style, but I like to go image by image. Should I leave what the camera did? Should I just use the Fujifilm JPEG? Or should I go over to the RAW, this is the RAW file, and start developing the RAW and changing colors on the RAW and doing that? So my philosophy is kind of like this. So here's the Fujifilm JPEG, and let me reset it because sometimes I shoot underexposed a little bit. This is, in this case, like for this photograph, and most of my editing is kind of like a case-by-case basis, I will just fix exposure, and my settings in camera when I took this photograph is what I was going for. I used the classic chrome film simulation. I also had shadows that were, boosted a little bit up, and the colors were boosted a little bit. I was also playing with the chrome effect here, which sort of darkened some of these reds, which is what I was going for. So in this case, I really wouldn't go, although I always recommend shooting RAW and JPEG, that was JPEG. I wouldn't recommend coming in here and starting to try to, okay, I'm gonna put a classic chrome skin on. I know my colors were boosted just a bit. Let me fix the exposure, because what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to get what I was going for with the JPEG. Do you see what I'm saying? And it just becomes, what's the point of shooting RAW if you're just trying to get what Fujifilm was doing in the first place? So that's my first philosophy, is if your JPEGs are working, don't be afraid of having JPEG photographs. Again, I do recommend having the RAW, so in the future you want to be like, yo, this is what I wanted, something like this, then you can do it. In this situation, this is an edited JPEG. Here's the original JPEG. Now this is kind of a contrasty scene, but in a second I'll show you a scene that's definitely a little bit more contrasty. But I've talked about it before on this channel. You can edit the JPEGs. And so I recommend editing the JPEGs if you want to sort of make your Fujifilm, like this is classic Chrome, the camera was doing its own processing. I just want to enhance what the camera did. So for example, I want to see the bottom of the bridge, so I can bring the shadows up. JPEGs can be edited. Now it is a JPEG, so probably like this stuff in the background, you know, these colors and things like that. If I really had a sky that needed a little bit more work, I would probably I would start editing the RAW over here, where we can really sort of, you know, work getting the colors out of this sky in the back without anything weird happening. My philosophy here is, if you like what Fujifilm JPEGs are doing, but you just need a little bit of help, then you can, of course, enhance the JPEGs. Just note that, you know, if you start to go nuts, like I'm going to grab a brush here, give it some exposure, and I'm like, I want to bring out this bridge here. If you start doing stuff like that, like if you start to go too extreme, then it is a JPEG, and you will start to see noise and artifacts and stuff like that. So I do recommend editing a RAW if you really wanted to bring the detail out from under this bridge without a lot of noise. But the point I want to make here is, here I edited my JPEG and I was happy. Now I'm looking at it, I kind of just want to warm it up a little bit. And that's totally fine, but you have to ask yourself, are you editing for, you know, Fujifilm representation? Like you kind of want to do what Fujifilm, its processors do in camera? But if not, like for example, here Lightroom, this latest Lightroom gives you some sort of previews here. And what's cool is, just to use this as an example, I'm using the vintage here. I'm using vintage 8. They've added a new slider here, which is amount of how crazy you want to make your image. So there's the RAW straight out of camera, and I could add a little bit of this vintage and then edit this. I can actually come over here. This is what Lightroom did automatically. I can add more to the shadows. I can grab a brush and sort of brush under this bridge if I wanted to. So you see, this has nothing to do with, let me warm this up a little bit. Hold on, we're gonna just put the temperature up, make the bridge warmer, and then bring this down just a little bit there. So you see, you can edit the RAWs to your heart's content, and they look nothing like the Fuji. Oh, they kind of look alike, actually. So here on the left, we have an edited JPEG, and then we have an edited RAW, which can get sort of infinity anything done to it. The other time that I will edit a RAW is when white balance is a little bit of an issue, because when you shoot JPEG, the white balance is, let me reset this guy here. This was the white balance that was there. I can completely warm it up a little, but sometimes warming up a JPEG, you kind of get strange hues that you eventually kind of like need to fix. Where if you warm up a RAW file, it's usually a little bit more forgiving. So you see that's warming up the RAW, and if I warm the JPEG up by about the same amount, you get strange hues. So anytime you're messing with white balance, I jump immediately to the RAW. So that's where I'll put my classic chrome skin on if that's what I was shooting this morning. I'll boost the colors, which is what I had in camera. And now I can sort of, this is the cool, and by the way, this was auto white balance. I find that the Fujifilm XT3's auto white balance is defaults to very clean and very cool. So this is warming it up. I'm gonna add just a little bit of a green hue. And now I can add Shift M. I could add my radial gradient here if I want to sort of mess around with exposures. I can also do a regular gradient, which might be better. Now in this case, this is the JPEG straight out of camera. This is where it gets kind of weird, where you should definitely start editing your RAWs. However, of course, you can still edit the JPEG here. It's just when you start pulling a JPEG a little bit too much, you'll see that the image starts to fall apart. You see these buildings over here and all that. You can hit black and white, and now you can sort of play around with tones, and this is fun too, playing with tones. I could grab a brush and I could sort of brush in what I want over here, leaving the sky kind of boom, and then, you know, lessen that, bring the shadows out. So editing raw, there's definitely a place where you can edit raw here. Ooh, oh, that's nice right there. Okay, this is the edited JPEG. This is the original JPEG, and I just wanted to show you that you can edit your JPEGs without being too scared. This is definitely selective editing, and the way I did this was, let me reset the image. Crop. I looked like I straightened, and what we could do here is just sort of boost the shadows a little bit, lower the highlights a little bit, but not too much because it's a JPEG. We can warm the image up just a tad, and K, the letter K, gives you a brush. I can sort of brush in this foreground that I want here, and now we're playing with exposures. We can bring that up, we can bring the shadows up. So this is a case where you can edit the JPEG and not be too worried. If you were shooting JPEG only, then add a little bit of a film curve, and that's kind of nice. You could do the same thing, obviously, with the RAW, which gives you more sort of leeway. But again, this is kind of if maybe you liked what the camera did and you're liking the simulations. But that's not, it's just less work, let's just say that. Because here you would have to, add a classic chrome skin. But in camera, I know I had my highlights a certain way, the shadows a certain way, so I did like what the camera was doing. And in that case, I'm going to edit the RAW for its Fujifilm goodness for the color of this bridge. Okay, so if you're ever in Manhattan, give the Manhattan Bridge a little love, since Brooklyn Bridge gets all the love. That was fun. I'll see you guys next time.